Who's going to be working on it? Probably you?
Probably Steve or my other head guy.
You guys use these Series 50 pucks on any stuff you guys are doing? Basically what all these are is tightened down with Allen wrenches. You can take those out and replace them. They got O-rings and seals on the bottom. Okay. But you can basically replace these and put any type of fitting you want. So if you actually want to put something where you can connect a Type M to it, you can easily change that out.
Don't forget to leave the Type M.
Yeah, we brought some Type M adapters for you guys so that you can hook your hoses up into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the discharge valve. Discharge valve guide, discharge valve spring, and discharge valve.
Basically what you're going to have to replace is going to be this, because as that lap surface gets not quite as smooth, you're going to get a little bit of leaking. You shouldn't have to change it for a while, but you guys have an extra set of those in there. And then when you're done with those, you can send those back and we can relap them for you. So you've always got a set in process.
All right.
And then basically what on the inside of the hole, Robert?
All right. You could use this tool right here instead of your screwdriver. You can take your packing removal tool or a screwdriver. This is called your high pressure spacer. Your valve seat. Discharge side, suction side, compression seal. Compression seal.
You'll have two of those back to back or together, or on either side.
Suction
of that.
valve.
And it's spring loaded. There will be the spring should never have to be replaced.
They can break every once in a while, but very rarely.
Yeah. And there's two types of suction valves. You're going to see one that's ceramic and one that's stainless. You got your guys' spares are stainless. They're really interchangeable.
The ceramic valves, we've been through a lot of testing on them. We really like the way they perform against the suction because they don't wear the suction side out. They really do rather well. In order to replace the suction valve, it snaps off of the spring. Suction valve snaps in the spring. Check for flatness of the, make sure it kind of sits pretty level. It sits pretty good and level. Snap it onto the spring. You have a spring spacer located inside. I can pull that spring spacer right now. Spring spacer, stainless steel, never wears out. Spring sits on it for adjustment. Space the spring out properly. You're pulling your plunger. Spring spacer in. Suction spring.
Now what's going to be the warning or the signs that knows there's something wrong on the inside of here? What are they going to see?
You're going to see some pulsation. You're going to see your packing lines start pulsating. You're going to start seeing some heat coming out. You know, a lot of heat coming out. That's going to tell you your packing start leaking by. You're going to open up. You can open up your valve on each of your packing. This is barrel 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 barrel. You can open these up, check for heat. If it's really hot, then we know we've got a little packing leaking. Tells you that probably getting close to packing getting a little wore out. It'll run for a while. You'll see your pressure start dropping. You won't be able to make 40K. But there's two scenarios on that. It could be a packing, or it could be your nozzles getting worn and your nozzles open up. I'm sure you're aware of all that kind of stuff that you work on that. But you can see your nozzles getting wear and you start dropping pressure that way. There's two ways to accommodate that. You can jack the RPM up a little bit, speed the pump up just a little bit more till you get to your certain RPM to accommodate for worn nozzles. Or when they get so worn, we need to replace. Your suction block here, this is what we call our suction block. You can pull the suction block apart. There's an O-ring beside the barrel. Very rarely does it ever go out. But if you start getting some drippage in behind the suction block and you start seeing some drop, there's what we call a quad ring right in behind here. You pull the suction block off. The suction block torque's the same as the discharge block, which is about 310, 315. I think the book says 3, but I like to go a little bit over that. Always use anti-seize on your bolts. All three are set up the same thing. As I said, barrel 1, 2, and 3. When you take a barrel apart and you're looking and inspecting, always take the particular parts, set them on the barrels that they go to, especially your valve seats, because they're kind of worn with those particular valves. So I like to, when I take a certain part of something, I'll set it down for 1, 2, and 3 and keep them all organized there. So when you go back together, everything kind of goes back the same. Basically, take the suction block off. I usually take off apart the 2 JICs so you don't have to deal with the hoses. Take the crack them loose and just pull the block. And a lot of times what I'll do is just loosen the block up so far. Take the bolts, leave 2 bolts in. I'll pull the suction block back just a little bit, and I can get in there and put the O-ring in there. And then I can put the block back on there without ever having to take it off.
The only reason you have to take that off is to replace the quad seal or the barrels.
The what?
The only reason you have to take that block off is if you had a cracked barrel or if you had to replace the
or
quad.
quad ring.
Quad ring.
40Ks, don't ever see a barrel go not like a jet ski barrel at all. On your that one off. On the seal rings, they have a taper to them. You can see a taper here. They have a taper. That's to help the valve seat slide into place so that we don't tear. Always the taper goes towards the part that slides in. We have a small taper on our valve seat. Put the valve seat back in.
Why don't you let him do this?
Okay.
That way he can see it. It's usually, do you have a little hammer?
He didn't have that little hammer. I can push it in my hand.
You're going to have to usually tap that with a mallet or something like that. Something.
Never a piece of steel, piece of wood, piece of rubber, as you saw.
Something that you're not going to score it with.
And of course we have a O-ring. This is a Durometer 70 O-ring here. It's our high pressure spacer. And seal ring's already in it, which is set up against the discharge valve. Always inspect it, if you have problems, make sure you don't have a crack, because if you get a crack, it could possibly be this. Is a very rare occurrence, but you start having a lot of problems or something that could possibly crack, and I have seen them crack. We're dealing with a lot of pressure. Other than that, you slide that back in there, make sure it goes in nice and straight, tap it with your palm of your hand. That's it. You can see that it's sealed here around the edges just like the rest of them.
Now one thing you'll want to make sure is when you're putting that back in, you can pinch that O-ring. It's going to be covered. If you pinch the O-ring, it's going to, ruin that O-ring. So you just want to make sure you get those in there smooth. You can put a little grease on the O-ring too, can't you, Robert? Or do you do that?
A little anti-seize.
A little anti-seize or something like that.
I always check my discharge valve. Make sure we got a little spring here, because this is where so I always check my suction valve, make sure that, or my discharge valve, make sure we got it. Always inspect around the edges. The smoother the edge, the better, and they can be lapped. You can slide that back in. Always push it in and push it. Make sure it moves freely. That's it. And that'll depend on the location of your plunger. Where plunger's all the way this way, so this one here won't move, but these here will. We got a 3.5-inch stroke on it. We're done with that. We put it back together. We've inspected the valve seats. Seal rings look good. The seal ring here is a very tight fit. It only seals against a flat mated surface here. You can feel you feel that you'd almost think there wasn't anything on it. That's all it takes. Take them out, take a screwdriver or a pick or something and plop them out. You put the new ones in, they take quite a bit of force. Take your thumbs and press them down in there, because they are a very tight fit. Other than that, when you put the thing back together, you want to make sure that these sit on these fine. These are a little bit beveled to help you, and 2 people do make it easier, but 1 can do it. I'll help you out here. And the important thing is, line her up. Just put a couple bolts in there.
Yeah, it helps if this is a 2-person job.
I do them all the time by myself. But
Yeah, you can do them by yourself, but it helps if there's 2. And he sees like crazy.
yeah, I just didn't
Never
see
know.
just a while
Yeah.
ago.
I saw you.
Put me one on the bottom. Okay.
So start with 150 to 200 foot-pounds. Do it about 3 times, then up to about 310.
310, 315.
Okay.
I like to just snug them up. And important here is to notice that we keep the same space on the boats here on the block. Because that way, if it gets crooked, it won't seal, and you fire it up, it'll leak. So I like to just torque a couple of bolts, get them kind of hand tight so that you're not fighting the torque wrench. And it is very important to keep the spacing here even. Torque sequence on the boat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Let me get that from the front. Do that again. Hold on. There we go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Perfect.
Right there. And you pop that snap ring out right there.
Okay.
Let me see your pocket knife. Come on. Now I don't want to ruin it. You can. This is what we call a hydrous bearing. This is replaceable too. This will pop out of there. Very rare do these go bad, but they do go bad sometimes. What you do is you take a little screwdriver, you lay this down here on the, and you just take it, you just barely tap it. You'll push it. That'll push on out, and you can see the low pressure seal. See the little clear seal right there? Mm-hmm. That's your low pressure seal. You push that out, put your new low pressure seal in it, push it back in. Make sure it's down past this ring where that groove in there that sets in there. Take your ring. And they're kind of slick. Make sure it snaps down in there good. That's it. And then and then to remove the packing, you can see the packing now. Since I got that out of there. You bring your stools over if you want that stool.
You're gonna have to hold that to show that to him. I can't.
Packing's here. You take your tool like this right here. I'm backing behind it. You pop that out right there. You just pop. Pop, pop, packing slide out. You slide your. If I took it out now, it could run the packing. I mean, we don't want to risk running a packing. You take that out. Give me that nut right there. I take that nut. Push that in just to here. I take that nut like this. Use it as a hammer. I'll drive that packing in there a little bit so that we kind of get it started. Take my nut, put it back in. Give me some fresh anti-seize there, sir. Might be in that toolbox.
Oh yeah.
All right. Start your nut on in there. Now this pipe you got really is a good pipe. I'll show you what I do. Because when you go in there, you won't get the packing drove all the way in. It'll leave your nut sticking out. And what I do when I'm pushing the packing in there, I take this pipe. I have one in my truck personally. I'll go ahead and tighten it up, but because that packing will push in hard, I'll put the pipe on there. And then I'll use that as a leverage right there. And then I'll just force that in there, like so.
Snug it down good.
Snug it down, and then this is where I take a hammer and hit it, but I don't have one. But I'm going to force it right here with this. I usually just take a hammer. We're good.
Cool.
And then the collet, I got the collet. The important thing on the collet and the nut is to always make sure this plunger bottoms out in there. So what I do, I'll roll this up here a little bit. I'll bring this on up. Start my nut a little bit. Roll it on forward, and you can see right down in that hole right there. I like to come back.
Oh, okay.
And you see that plunger?
Yeah.
I want it to come all the way back and bottom out. So that looks like it's bottomed out there by the feel. Put the collet nut on there, and you don't want to over tighten these collet nuts. That's what happens when you tend to over tighten them. They tend to wear those collets out.
Oh, okay.
In here, and it be a bitch to get off. About 50 foot-pounds, that's what I like. But if they're too loose, it won't hold it. So that's about right there.
About grunt tight.
So then I always take the machine once I put it together, and I always roll it so that I know, make sure that I'm not going to, my packing nut not going to hit my barrel. So I like to make sure I got plenty of clearance. It's going to pull the plunger okay. And it looks good. Now you're going to see a little bit of drip first start up here with those low pressure seals, but as you run this, it'll expand those low pressure seals, and they'll quit leaking.
Okay.
They're dripping just a hair, but if we run that and they expand those seals out, they'll quit leaking. If not, we'll put some new ones in it.
Cool.
But they usually go away because it's brand new. And this machine ain't been ran to seat in very long.
Yeah. Cool.
That's it.
Awesome.